There comes a moment when life strips you down to nothing, when the plans you held on to collapse in your hands, and the world you thought you understood dissolves into silence. It feels like failure, but it isn't. It's an invitation, a quiet, unsettling whisper that asks, who will you become now that everything you were has fallen apart? And in that emptiness, where the old you can no longer survive, your rebuilding begins.
Sometimes, life doesn't reset you. It strips you bare so you can finally meet the version of yourself that survival once buried. You didn't choose to start over. Life forced your hands into the fire and left you standing in the ruins of a world you once trusted. And now, in the quiet aftermath, you find yourself staring at the pieces of your life scattered in ways you never imagined. This is the place no one prepares you for. The space between who you were and who you don't yet recognize. The space where your identity feels like a shadow, where even your own reflection looks like a memory you're trying to remember. But this message, this moment, is for you. For the one who wakes up each morning wondering how to rebuild when everything familiar has collapsed. For the one who feels the weight of unspoken fears pressing against the ribs, heavier than the failures that created them. You've tried explaining the emptiness, the exhaustion, the sense of being completely unanchored, but people only see the surface, not the silent battles roaring beneath your skin. And somewhere, deep inside, beneath the wreckage, beneath the doubt, there's still a flicker, a quiet instinct that refuses to die. The part of you whispering that this breaking wasn't destruction, it was removal. Removal of the noise, the expectations, the versions of you that were never real. Because rebuilding from zero isn't about putting back what broke. It's about discovering who you were meant to become once everything false was stripped away. Your life is not falling apart. It's clearing space. It's restarting. It's giving you a foundation you never had the courage to build before. And that shift, that painful, disorienting, liberating shift, is not your ending. It's the opening chapter of your rise.
Every rebirth begins with a moment when you swear you can't take one more step, and then, somehow, you do. You don't rebuild your life in one brave moment. You rebuild it in the small, quiet ones no one ever sees. The ones where you wake up with that heaviness in your chest and force yourself to stand anyway. The ones where the silence in your room feels louder than your thoughts, yet you choose to keep moving through it. The ones where you look around and realize you're starting from nothing. No clear direction, no safety net, no familiar identity to lean on, and still, you refuse to let the darkness define you. Rebuilding from zero is not the heroic journey people imagine. It's raw, disorienting, and deeply personal. It's the slow realization that the life you were living wasn't truly yours, and now you're holding the responsibility of shaping the one that will be. There's fear in that. There's grief. There's a quiet mourning for the version of you that tried so hard to hold everything together. But there's also something else. Something almost sacred in the moment you finally accept that who you were is gone and who you're becoming is still unfolding. You'll find yourself questioning everything. Was any of it real? Why did it have to collapse? Why me? Why now? This is where most people panic. This is where they run back to what broke them just because it felt familiar. But you, the fact that you're still here, listening, breathing through the ache, means you're wired for something bigger. You don't rebuild by forcing your life to look like the past. You rebuild by letting your past become a teacher instead of a prison. One day, and it usually happens unexpectedly, something small will shift. Maybe it's the way sunlight enters your room after a long night. Maybe it's a moment where you catch yourself laughing again, even if just for a second. Maybe it's the sudden awareness that the pain you've been carrying doesn't swallow the entire horizon anymore. These tiny moments, the ones that seem insignificant, are the whispers of your becoming. Proof that your spirit, despite everything, is learning how to breathe again. Rebuilding from zero asks you to sit with yourself without distractions, to face the parts of your story you've ignored for years, to ask yourself who you truly are when no one is clapping, watching, or expecting anything from you. That's where the real foundation begins, not in the noise, but in the silence. And slowly, painfully, beautifully, you begin to gather the pieces, not to restore what broke, but to create something you've never allowed yourself to imagine before. Something authentic, something aligned, something entirely yours. Because starting from zero isn't a punishment, it's an invitation. The moment life hands you an empty page and asks, who will you become now that everything that wasn't you is gone?
The moment you stop running from your pain is the moment it finally reveals why it came. Rebuilding from zero doesn't truly begin with action. It begins with understanding. Not the convenient kind. Not the kind you tell people so they stop asking questions, but the kind that forces you to look straight into the parts of your life you've avoided. The truth is, nothing falls apart without a reason, and nothing inside you breaks without pointing to a deeper layer that's asking to be healed. This is the point where the journey becomes less about reconstruction and more about revelation. You start to notice the patterns, the ones that shaped your decisions, the ones that pushed you into rooms you never belonged in, the ones that kept you loyal to pain that wasn't yours to carry. There's a silent clarity that rises from the ruins, and it asks you to dig deeper, to question who taught you to settle, who convinced you that your voice was too small, who made you believe that your worth depended on how much you could endure instead of how much you could become. This is where the discomfort intensifies, because rebuilding from zero means stripping away identities you were praised for but never aligned with. It means letting go of expectations, your own and the ones from people who never truly saw you. It means acknowledging that the life you lost wasn't built on truth, but on survival. And survival is not the same as living. In the deep dive, you confront the memories you buried beneath pride, the relationships you held on to out of fear, the dreams you abandoned because someone convinced you they weren't realistic. You confront the versions of yourself that learned to shrink to keep the peace. And as painful as it is, each realization becomes a key, unlocking parts of you that have been silent for years. This is also the moment you understand something most people never realize. Starting from zero gives you access to a level of clarity and power that staying stable never could. When everything is stripped away, when the noise disappears, when the world goes quiet, you finally hear yourself. Not the doubt, not the fear, not the voices that taught you to dim your light, but you, the version that always existed underneath the pain. And it's here, in this honesty, that rebuilding becomes less about recovering what was lost and more about rising into what was waiting. You begin to see that your breaking was not a failure, it was a filter. Everything that couldn't stay didn't. Everything that wasn't aligned fell away. Everything that wasn't you burned out. Because the truth is, the deeper you go into your own darkness, the closer you get to the light that was meant only for you.
There comes a moment when the pain stops breaking you and starts building you. The turning point never announces itself. It rarely arrives with fireworks or clarity. It comes quietly, almost invisibly, disguised as the moment you finally get tired of feeling powerless. It's that night when you're sitting alone, staring at the ceiling, realizing that no one is coming to save you. And for the first time, that truth doesn't destroy you. It awakens you. This is the shift, the moment your story changes direction.
you begin to understand that everything you lost didn't weaken you. It stripped you down to your core so you could finally see what you're truly made of. And it's in this raw, unfiltered version of yourself that you discover something you never noticed before. The strength you were begging life for was already inside you, waiting for the silence to surface. The turning point is not about external change, it's internal. It's the moment you stop asking, "Why did this happen to me?" and start asking, "What is this trying to make me?" It's when your questions stop coming from fear and start coming from purpose. When you stop replaying memories that broke you and start imagining a future you've never allowed yourself to believe you deserve. You start making different choices, small ones at first. You get up earlier. You breathe deeper. You begin to treat yourself with a bit more respect, even if it feels unnatural. You stop apologizing for wanting more. You stop shrinking to fit spaces beneath you. And for the first time in a long time, you start listening to the version of yourself that you silenced to survive. And that's when everything changes. Not because life suddenly gets easier, it rarely does, but because you're no longer approaching your life from a place of fear. You're approaching it from truth, from clarity, from the growing awareness that the person you're becoming is stronger than the person you lost. The turning point teaches you that your past didn't break you, it prepared you. Every disappointment sharpened your instincts. Every betrayal strengthened your boundaries. Every loss carved space inside you for something greater. You're no longer fighting to rebuild the old version of yourself. You're rising into a version that never depended on things that could be taken away. You begin to realize that your heartbreaks were training, your setbacks were shaping, your collapse was awakening. Because the moment you stop being afraid of starting from zero is the moment zero becomes your power, not your prison.
What rises from zero is not a repair of who you were, but the birth of who you were meant to become. When you finally reach the end of yourself, the end of the identities you clung to, the expectations you carried, the fears you hid behind, something remarkable happens. You begin to see your life with a clarity that was impossible before everything collapsed. You realize that the person you were desperately trying to hold together was too small for the destiny that's calling you. Rebuilding from zero isn't just about healing, it's about awakening. You start to understand your strength not as something you earned, but as something you were born with. You see your journey not as a series of losses, but as a series of redirections. And you recognize that the version of you who survived the breaking is not the same version who will rise from it. This is the moment where your story turns from pain to purpose. Not because the past didn't hurt, it did, deeply. Not because you magically got over it. Healing is never that simple. But because you learned to stand in the ashes of your old life with a heart that refuses to give up. You stop looking back. You stop bargaining with what left. You stop apologizing for wanting more than survival. And slowly, your identity reshapes itself, not from the expectations of others, but from the truth of your own soul. You discover a resilience that can't be taught, a clarity that can't be taken, a purpose that can't be erased. And here's the beautiful part. You don't have to know every step ahead. You don't need the full map. You just need your next breath, your next choice, your next moment of courage. Because rising is built one decision at a time. You are not who you were before the breaking. You are stronger. You are wiser. You are becoming the version of yourself that your old life wasn't big enough to hold. This is your beginning. This is your rise. This is the moment everything changes. Not because the world shifts, but because you do. And when you rebuild from zero, you don't return to who you were. You become someone the breaking could never touch. If this message found you in a moment you needed it, stay. There's more coming. Like the video, leave a comment with your story, and subscribe so you don't rise alone.